Welcome to Nasdaq TradeTalks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining me for this segment, we have Dr. Winegarden, Senior Fellow in Business and Economics at the Pacific Research Institute, to discuss why reforming the legal system could boost the U.S. economy by 2% over time. Dr. Winegarden, it's great to see you as always. Welcome back to Trade Talks.
Well, it's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
You got it. And at the Pacific Research Institute, your research shows that the economy could boost 2% over time if we save money on something called the tort tax. How much is that costing Americans? And give us some more background on that.
Well, it's costing Americans about $1,300 each every year. So it's not an insignificant number. And the way the tax comes into play is that you can almost call them entrepreneurial lawyers who are going out there searching for technical violations, especially something like the Americans with Disabilities Act. Well, they'll target small businesses for these technical violations. The sign is slightly askew, or the parking space is a few centimeters narrower than it should be. And what they end up doing is using that violation as a chance to get $10,000, $30,000, $40,000 settlements. Those add up over time. And it's not just small businesses, it's large as well. And so over time, the reduction in activity, the cost, the defensive things we have to do adds up. And that's the tort tax. That's $1,300 a year every family is paying because of tort litigation.
What would tort reform look like, and how could that potentially generate new revenue? How much revenue could it actually generate?
Well, we're talking about over time, hundreds of billions of dollars of additional revenue, because what we're doing is we're expanding the pie. And that's something we've lost track of recently. We have a lot of anti-growth policies coming down the pike, whether it's regulations, whether it's on the tort system, whether it's the tax system on trade. And we need to get back to a much more pro-growth policy. By expanding the pie, we're going to increase government revenues, but we're increasing government revenues by increasing our income, by increasing economic activity. The way we do it with respect to tort is we've got to get rid of the current incentives that incentivize too much litigation. So very common sense reforms, capping the amount that a litigator can get, so to reduce the benefits from filing these types of lawsuits. Increasing or decreasing the cost of defending these lawsuits, and encouraging settlements by having loser pays. So if you file a frivolous lawsuit, not only are you not going to get anything, but you've got to cover the cost of that small business to defend itself. Now small businesses are more empowered to actually fight off these really frivolous lawsuits, so that they can continue to operate these mom and pop stores. So they're very sensible reforms that we can do that would reduce the costs and really meaningfully impact our growth.
Do you think tort reform is or could be a reality in the United States?
There's a lot of very powerful interest groups against it, and people will come up with red herrings. They'll say, oh, well, you're going to take away the court system, people's opportunity to get justice for real harms. And that's not what tort reform would do, right? Tort reform, you still have the availability to sue if a company sells a defective product, or if they were negligent in terms of the storefront or things along those lines. But what we need to do is get rid of kind of those very clearly obvious ones. So I think it's a long haul, but I think then that was part of the reason we wanted to do this report, is we need to bring attention to it, we need to talk about it, and we need to talk about the benefits of it. One of the things that I think is beneficial is that we're getting out of the typical debates that we have. Oh, should we cut taxes? Should the government spend more? These just typical stimulus debates. Tort reform is something that can cut across kind of those partisan lines and hopefully create some type of bipartisan kind of consensus. We've got a big interest group against it, so it is a heavy lift, but I think by talking about it and bringing the subject up again, hopefully we can kind of get that ball rolling.
And you read my mind, because my next question was, do you think this actually can get bipartisan support? It seems as if every single issue, it becomes a talking point of us versus them. But it sounds, without having to talk about raising taxes to meet revenue obligations, this seems like it could, potentially be a logical fit for bipartisan support.
Absolutely. It could be. And it's just a matter of really fighting back against the special interests and really kind of positioning it correctly and making people understand this is not just an issue for large corporations. And undoubtedly it is. Right? We look at kind of some of these securities lawsuits. There's tons of money that they're being impacted there, but this is a mom and pop issue. And if you ask any small business owner, what are some of the things that concern them? These tort issues, they're a real threat. And so I think in that small business impact, and that's why we tried to emphasize it. That's where I think a bipartisan consensus could possibly emerge. It's not going to be easy, and we're not naive enough to think that it's easy, but I think that the impact on the small business is what can bring the people from both sides of the aisle together, hopefully.
All right, Dr. Winegarden, appreciate the insight as always. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.